morning and welcome to the first webinar of 2020. Gosh, that sounds a bit adult. And we just had a quick discussion actually about the topic of today being mouse wisdom, being New Year, the Chinese New Year of the rat. So it's obviously rodent orientated. So I hope it's topical for you. So I'm going to be doing the presentation this morning. I'm Katharine Metters, as some of you will know. I'm the lead consultant with Posturite, and I'm ably assisted today by Chris Pratt, who is our purchasing manager. Actually, no, he's our procurement manager, beg your pardon. And so he's kindly going to put all the questions to me later. So morning, Chris.
Good morning, Katharine, and good morning, everyone.
There you go. And I'm hoping he'll also help me out on some of the questions we have later, because what he doesn't know about mice probably isn't worth knowing as well. As with all our webinars, we will be recording it today. So if you have any technical problems, or if you need to leave us, or if you want to share it with other people in the future, it is going to be available on our website, as well as any questions we don't manage to get to during the broadcast. So right, let's leap on now into all about mice and mouse wisdom. I thought it would be useful to start with maybe where the first mouse really came from, and it was only in the 1960s. Now, for some of you, you may think 1960s was a long time ago, but some of us were born in the 1960s, and it was then that the mouse first created. And here is a picture of what it first looked like. It was in fact invented by a gentleman called Douglas Engelbart. I knew I was going to have trouble saying that, with Bill English, and it was patented in 1970. And it was initially called an XY position indicator for a display system. I think I prefer mouse or input device. And in fact, from my perspective, it really didn't cause us too many problems. When I first started doing assessments back in, I suppose, 1990, just before the regulations came in, the mouse really didn't cause us a lot of issues. It was pretty much keyboard problems. And in fact, if you look at the regulations that came out in 1992, the mouse actually doesn't have any specific minimum requirements in the schedule. So I think that again gives us an indication that initially the mouse wasn't too much of interest as far as problems or concerns at the workstation. However, today things are slightly different. What I thought I would do is start off with a few basics. Now, many of you will be aware of this. Really just to stir a bit of background so you all know what I'm talking about when I start talking about movements. So in the bottom left of this screen, you'll actually see sort of the various hand positions. So if I'm talking about flexion, you'll see it's when the palm of the hand goes downwards. Extension is the back of the hand coming upwards. And when we're talking about deviation, that's movement of the hand relative to the wrist. And then we have something called pro and supination, which is really twisting of the forearms. So the hand is either down or then it's rotated upwards into supination where the palm is upwards. I also wanted to draw your attention to actually how important the neck and the shoulder was, because all the nerves, which you can see coming out in yellow in this diagram, come out and they weave a path between all these muscles and structures from the neck and into the arm. And so many of the upper limb problems and wrist and hand problems we see actually may originate further up the limb and in the neck and in the shoulder. So as I'm talking about this today, I will be talking about shoulder position. And I hope that makes some sort of sense why I'm talking about it, because it's very, very important to comfort whilst using a mouse. Looking at the hand on the right-hand side, this is a diagrammatic representation of the carpal tunnel. If I put my mouse across here, this is the transverse ligament, and between that and the rest of the hand is a channel, which we call the carpal tunnel, and through that go all the ligaments and the nerve and some of the blood supply. And obviously anything that reduces the size of that tunnel is going to cause a problem. So that is sort of a representation of the carpal tunnel that I may refer to later. And finally on this slide, just wanted to show you the positions as far as the shoulder position in using the mouse. We'll refer back to this, but how the position of the mouse can have a direct effect on the shoulder and therefore the upper limb position. So with that background in mind, what are our problems? Well, I would say the most common issues with using the mouse tend to be neck ache, shoulder pain, and wrist, hand, and elbow pain. And as I've said, sometimes it's quite difficult, even when you've got wrist and hand pain, to realise whether it's actually coming from that local area or whether it may be referred from the neck or the shoulder. So that's why I'm going to keep coming back to those two things. You're probably very aware of the advice set up at the workstation, and I think you'd agree that it hasn't really changed, and it is really just a compromise. It's not ideal for us to sit in these positions, but this is the best compromise we have to put the joints in a good position and still able to get our work done. And you can see the important points, which I'm going to come to again later, which is making sure the arm is in a nice neutral position by the body, the wrist in a nice neutral position, and the whole body supported. It's also really important to ensure that the forearm and the hand are in line with the shoulder to ensure that we don't have any added tensions or any problems with that at all. Looking specifically at the position of the arm and the mouse, we can see here the problem we have with a full-size keyboard. Many of us, actually probably I am, but many other people are smaller than the keyboard. And so we can see that if one is to reach the mouse here, that's going to cause a deviation of the arm away from the body, which if it's sustained for long periods or repetitively can cause a problem. The human body is very robust, and if we just do that occasionally, that shouldn't be a problem. This is an example of a solution where we actually ensure that the mouse has a position close to the keyboard with a keyboard of a suitable size to enable a far better position. And this being a close-up very much of how we want that arm and hand position to be, with the upper arm nice and relaxed by our body, and then with the elbow to the wrist roughly much in line to allow the tissues to be relaxed and in a good working position. Seems fairly easy so far. However, we do have quite a few problems, and I just want to go through 4 of the most common ones that we do see. The first one is actually nothing to do with the hand or the upper limb at all. It's all to do with the sitting height. If we sit too high or too low, then it actually has a major effect on the position of the hand and therefore how we use our mouse. It's fairly obvious from these 2 pictures that if you sit too low, you have an upward angle of your forearm, and though to compensate, you land up with this angle at your wrist, which is going to cause a problem for the structures within the wrist. If you sit too high, you have the opposite occurring. So again, the compensation occurs at the wrist and you land up with extension, which is also detrimental to the tissues in the hand. This picture pretty much shows a picture further away. What this person has probably done is lowered their chair to ensure they have good foot support and not realizing the detrimental effect they're going to have on their hand. Now, they may well come to us and say, I've got a problem with my mouse. It hurts when I use my mouse. But I hope you'd agree with me that it's actually not to do with the mouse, this situation. This is to do with the overall posture of the person and the fact they're sitting too low. Sorry, slight technical problem going on here. We'll be all right in a minute. There we go. So the next category I want to come to is actually the length of time that the one's using the item for, using the mouse for. So prolonged use. If you are using your tissues to, I'm definitely having a technical problem here. Bear with me, please. There you go. If you are using your mouse, your tissues to hold the mouse, your blood supply to those tissues reduces because it's like trying to push fluid through something that's quite firm. If your tissues that are working are not getting the oxygen and the nutrition they need, they will fatigue and that will land into injury and pain. So gripping hold of the mouse, holding it in awkward positions is going to cause you problems. This, I think, particularly the case. I quite often see people who are gripping hold of their mouse between their thumb and their either 5th or 4th fingers, and they have constant tension in their hand. as well as those people who are leaning forwards and putting their arm forwards. Then we've got actually the poor design of the mouse, or actually lack of setup of the settings. Here we have some examples, and I think you'd agree that the fit between many of these hands and the item and the mice is actually very poor. We can see in this picture the person grabbing it between their thumb and their fifth finger, and you can see the tension. I would suggest this mouse is really too small for this individual. This one here, we've got tension with the scrolling finger, as well as potentially tension between this finger and the thumb on the other side. This mouse definitely looks too small for this hand, and again you can see the tension there, and the position of the mouse is an issue. So actually the ratio between the hand and the mouse is important, but also the settings. Are you all aware that you can change the settings on your mouse so its travel distance is less or more relative to what you use it? And you can change the clicking aspects of your mouse, and actually even you change the button functions. Sometimes it's not so much the mouse, is it set up for us? And I would strongly advise you to have a good look at your settings if you're struggling with anything like that. If you find yourself digging your mouse, trying to get it underneath the keyboard, which I'm afraid I have done at times, it may be time to look at your settings and see whether you've got that set up correctly. And finally, on my hit list of problems, I've got abduction, so reaching out with the shoulder, flexion or rotation of the shoulder. I found this wonderful picture, this little diagram on the internet. Common issue, the mouse creeping forwards, and I think that is a real problem for people. And if we look at these pictures, you'll see what I mean. It's not the mouse's fault it is where it is, but if that reaching for it, it's causing poor arm positioning. So you're going to get tension in the shoulder. And in fact, you can almost see tension in this gentleman's forearm here. We need to bring it back in line. And that is one of the common problems I find with mouse use, is actually what's going on further up the body at the shoulder. So really bringing this together, what are we going to check if upper limbs are concerned? Upper limb pain, wrist, forearm pain is reported. Very much take a step back, look at the forearm and wrist position. Make sure the arm is relaxed by the body. Stand behind somebody, have a look at the posture. Is it symmetrical? Can you start to see daylight between their arm and their body? Look for those repetitive, awkward movements. No matter how good the position is, if we don't move, there's going to be a problem. So lack of breaks and movement is a huge issue for us. And just check the paperwork isn't getting in the way of a really good setup. A webinar, I suppose, on mice wouldn't be a webinar on mice, and if we looked at some of the options. Now, I don't intend to go through the array of ones on this screen. I'm going to talk about other things, but I thought it was important just to say, what do we have to consider when we are deciding on a mouse? It's not a simple decision. We need to consider the tasks we do. Do we need to program any buttons? Are we going to be going between multiple screens? Do we need programmable buttons? Do we need to zoom? How much mouse work are we doing? Are we going to be moving around? So these sorts of tasks will often dictate what type of mouse you're going to need, and then we need to reduce it after that. What about the size? How big is your hand? The mice do come in different sizes these days, and it's important to get one that fits and supports your hand. Left or right-handed, or is it going to be for multiple use? So maybe you need to have one that can be used with either hand. Whether it's going to be mobile, what the effect the mouse has on your forearm position. Are you somebody that needs to rotate your forearm away from the desk? Maybe you've got a sore spot, or maybe there is a scar that we need to avoid. Maybe we need to relax the hand more. What are we trying to achieve with the upper arm position? Because that may well have an effect on the type of mouse that you choose. And let's not forget, we all have different preferences, and it's important that we find something that suits what you like. So what are the types we've got? People often ask me, can you just do me a document, what mouse for what condition? Well, sorry, the answer to that I think is we can't. It's too complex. But let's look at the types of mice. I've got some examples here of upright or less pronated mouse, so mice that require you to have your hand less flat. These will provide a more neutral handshake position, although in no position of the arm are all the tissue is going to be completely relaxed. But these are often very beneficial for people who have tension in the forearm. I find swapping people to an upright mouse allows them to be more relaxed, particularly if there is a base on the mouse so they don't have to grip it. And particularly people who maybe have surgery or carpal tunnel, they find that these sorts of upright mice are far more beneficial to them. So these are very popular, and I have to say I use these quite a lot myself. Then we've got track balls and track bars. I mean, they're similar, but I put them together on this slide. If we look at this mouse here, the whole mouse actually stays still, and the movement comes from moving this ball. This has the benefits of needing a very small space to use it on, because you don't need to move the mouse. You can also support the upper limb in a very still but supported position, because all the movement comes from the fingers. However, obviously, if we've got a finger problem, all the movement coming from the fingers could be detrimental. So there are pros and cons that we have to consider. When we look at the track bars and similar products, these allow us to use the product with either hand, so sharing the load can be very beneficial. And as you can see, it allows also both hands to be used more centrally, so that will help to prevent that movement sideways of the arm, which can so often cause shoulder problems. This is a similar product here, where the mouse is actually moved with both the trackpad but also this sort of rounding, I don't know how you say it actually, it's a sort of a little round pad, I suppose. Personally, I find it quite difficult to use, but there are people who find that quite useful. Again, it brings everything centrally and allows sharing of the load. I've decided to do an other input devices because there are so many other little odd bits out there that I just thought I'd bring them together. We've got mice like this, which are travel mice, so they're able to go, this one's actually able to go flat, so it fits into a pocket and allows you to travel with it very much easily. I think that's a great benefit. I use something similar myself. You have ones with lots of different options to program for keys, and that can be very useful if you're using multi-functions. This is a foot mouse, so you can actually use that to click and to use other, it reduces the forces through the hand because you're able to use the foot to actually action the clicks and that type of thing. Then we have quite complex gaming mouse. I'm afraid I'm not a gamer myself, so my knowledge of gaming mouse is relatively small, but I do know that you need to provide good support and plenty of programmable functionality, and there's quite a few of those out there. Then we have things like graphics tablets. And I included this because there is quite a lot of innovation these days in both pointing devices that can be controlled by your eyes, but also your head movements. And let's also not forget the voice activation that a lot of people now use allows you to navigate with that too. So lots of innovation going on in different ways to interact with your systems, which I think is very encouraging. And then we have pen type mice. A lot of us are taught how to hold a pen at school, and so this can often be a very beneficial way for people who need to relax their hand and need to find a different input device. I think it's just useful just to mention there is associated equipment that was there to support mice, usually because the basic setup and the functionality of the mouse has not been ideal for somebody, so they've developed a problem. So this is an additional support you could put onto a mouse. This is a mouse mat with a support on it. I have to say, generally, I find that these aren't very helpful because I find that people tend to lean on them and you tend to get a focused movement around the wrist. However, we are all different, and there are different situations where occasionally things like that can be of benefit. For me, if you're thinking about using something like this, please check that your relationship of your height to your desk is correct before thinking about it. It's not there to overcome a fundamental problem. Then we have a support here that obviously allows a lot of support. You put your forearm in here, provides good support for your upper limbs, so those people with more complicated upper limb problems. And again, this is just an additional support if you're struggling to find a good position to use your mouse. Just want to re-emphasize the real importance, no matter how good your mouse is, no matter how good your position is, you need to move. So please make sure that regular breaks, probably get your hand off the mouse at least every 20 minutes, shake it out, move around, and actually get your whole body moving. We are designed to move. So please, no matter how good thing your setup is, make sure you do that. Here are some very simple exercises that you can do if you want more information on this. We do have information on our website, or speak to any health provider, and they'll be able to provide you with some specific ones that might be able to help you. Oh, just looking at the time, we need to wrap up. I'm not doing too badly today, actually. I really just want to say it's really important we do get the right device for the person and the tasks that they do. We want people to be productive and comfortable, and there's no reason, we've got lots of choice that we shouldn't do that. But we need to make sure, no matter how good the piece of equipment is, it is set up correctly. So it does support somebody's posture. We don't want people supporting themselves. We want them to be well supported in a good posture. And let's not forget that there are lots of little IT hacks and support to make sure that we can use the devices we have as well as we can. And don't forget those movement and those breaks. And it wouldn't be a sort of good mouse webinar without me showing you this. I'm just advising you just to take a moment and think about your mouse and how you hold it. I hope that's been useful. I don't know whether, Chris, we've had any questions come in. If we have, do you want to fire me one?
Sure, yeah, we've had a couple come in while you've been on, Katharine. So the first one's from Paul. He's asking, how do you feel about using multiple mouse devices at the same time?
Well, actually, I think sometimes that can be really useful. Often, if you're using different tasks, a different device might be better for some tasks rather than others. But actually, sometimes having two mice available to you to share the load can be a really excellent idea. So I don't use multiple mice myself at the same time, but I know lots of people who do, and actually do that really effectively. So yes, that could be really useful.
Fantastic. Tom's also been on asking if the clicking action is the main problem. Is there an effective alternative to clicking a mouse? Do you want me to fill that one? There is some software out there, actually. It's called clickless software, and the software allows you to hover over things on the screen, and if you hover over it for a certain amount of time, I think it's 2 seconds, and it automatically performs a clicking function rather than having to click the mouse. So that's a potential solution there. I don't know if you have any physiological tips, Katharine, for that.
Yes, I mean, I think it's not so much, I think it's the over clicking. I think you're right, Chris, the software is very, very useful. For me, I see more problems actually with the positioning and the holding. I've not seen that many problems with the actual clicking, but also you can get mice that have almost membranes rather than buttons. So if you don't want to use the software, there are mice with slightly different sort of input options that you can use. So there are alternatives out there. So yeah, I mean, if we can provide further information afterwards about any of them, just give us a shout. Was it Paul?
That was Tom.
Yeah, I mean, if Tom contacts us, we can give him some more information.
Brilliant. Okay, so Paul's been on, another Paul. Can you advise on the frequency of breaks and their length? So how many we would advise on?
Well, of course, I'm going to sit on the fence slightly, but what I would say is, I think really, if you're doing a lot of mouse work, I mean, your hand really does need to come off frequently. So, don't go 20 minutes or more than 20 minutes without taking your hand off the mouse, shake it out and move it. If you're more of an intermittent user, then that's probably not so much a problem. But yes, try several times an hour. You need to get your hand off the mouse, and the more the better, sadly. So little and often. And so the length of the break, you only really need, 10, 15 seconds. I mean, just to sort of loosen it up and get the blood flow going. So little and often is the key there.
Okay, and our last question's from Amanda. It's vertical mice. Are there any negatives to using a vertical mouse as opposed to a standard mouse?
Oh, negatives. Oh, let me think. Some people, if you don't have a base on the mouse, some people do find that they get a wearing and can be quite sore on that sort of little finger border. Some people just don't seem to take to it. Don't like the upright posture. Do I know any specific negatives? None coming to mind. If any of our listeners and viewers sort of have an example that they think is a common problem with vertical mice, usually I think it's preference from my point of view. Or as I say, if you don't have the base, occasionally you can get sort of soreness on the border of the hand.
Fantastic, and that's it from Question Corner for today. Nothing else in the questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Chris, for joining me. I think we might have Chris on again in the future. He's quite good at this sort of thing. I would hope that we're going to sort of hear you all on, or hear and see you on our webinars later on in the year. We'll put them on our website as normal. This one will be recorded on the website. And any questions, please let us know. Thank you, and enjoy the Year of the Rat. And goodbye now.